Okay, so we've got official Galaxy S23 ads showing up and we're less than 10 days away. But as we inch closer, we too have unpacked a few more leaks and details around the S23. Now first thing, I want to clear the air about pricing and variants. So there's going to be no price hike, at least in the US. This leaflet from Verizon that's been leaked, it talks about the specifications, the variants, and pricing. And I'll talk about the specs later in the video. So the S23 base variant will start at 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM, while the S23 Plus and the S23 Ultra will start at 256 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM. Which also means that if you want 12 gigs of RAM, you're gonna have to necessarily go for the 512 gigs internal storage variant of the S23 Ultra. And we get last year's pricing of the S22 series, which means S23 base variant at $799, Plus variant at $999, and the S23 Ultra at $1199. But pricing in other regions are not exactly going to be the same. They'll be ballpark around the same figure as last year's S22. There's also a bunch of facts and leaks around the 200 megapixel sensor, which, least to say, is exciting. Firstly, it's a larger sensor than the S22 Ultra. They've also revealed that they're using ISOCELL HP2 sensor, which applies a deep learning algorithm to bring out the best of this 200 megapixel sensor. So when you crop into a photo, it does not lose details and sharpness. And that actually is confirmed by Ice Universe, who tweeted a photo claiming that it was taken using this 200 megapixel sensor, but cropped in 12 times. I mean, that's amazing. And so there's news and then there's evidence, somewhat. The S23 series will also come with a new tetrapixel technology for even better low-light photography. But more importantly, it's going to be able to focus on objects much faster in under low-light conditions. This video also claimed that the camera would have reduced shutter lag. So, you know, S22 Ultra, it did have a slightly slower shutter while the iPhone 14 Pro was clearly quite fast. And so with the S23 series, we should see faster snapping of photos, but is it going to be as fast as the iPhone 14 Pro series? Well, why don't you subscribe and turn on notifications so when I do get my hands on the device, you'd know too. And it seems like 8K video is getting an update too. You get a wider view and it's going to upgrade from 24 FPS to 30 FPS. So finally a frame rate that we can all appreciate. Next, earlier, if you move to a higher megapixel mode, you'd have to lose the HDR capability. But now Samsung has confirmed that you'll be able to use HDR mode in as high as 50 megapixel. Which again is not something that a lot of you would use, but in general, I like the direction in which these improvements are now heading. Another key improvement is that the sensor will be able to handle overexposed conditions very well. So if you look at these photos, typically you'd expect these parts of the photos to be absolutely blown out. But it seems like the image processing is working very well to balance that overexposure and maintain detail instead of just blowing it up. In fact, this problem of overexposure is something that I've seen happen very commonly on iPhones. I almost always have to bring down the exposure to get a decent click in most cases on the iPhone. Next, in another tweet, Ice Universe said that the file size of a picture taken using the 200 megapixel sensor is going to be between 20 and 40 MB, which actually is quite optimized. Now guys, just one thing. Don't compare this to the 75 MB photos that the iPhone 14 Pro series takes using the 48 megapixel lens and then say that it has more detail. That 75 MB in the 48 megapixel mode is only possible in RAW mode. We're just talking about photos taken using the standard mode on the 200 megapixel sensor, which is going to be between 20 and 40 MB. And so, you know, it's actually these features and improvements that I'm more excited about and not the number 200 megapixel. So it's the better low light photos, the better videos, the better HDR, the smoother 8K, and that accuracy that you get in extremely bright conditions. So those are the things that I'm really excited about when it comes to the camera. Okay, now let's talk about the specs. The specs are mostly in line with the recent leaks and rumors, but let me highlight the good stuff. So this is for S23 and the Plus variant only. You get One UI 5.1. These are the first devices that would ship with that version. Then you have the latest and the best Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. The display is not LTPO in both of them. You can see it's 48Hz to 120Hz. You do get Gorilla Glass Victus 2 Plus, so that's actually a very significant upgrade from a build perspective. The RAM is fixed for all variants for these two phones at 8 gigs. And then again, the internal storage starting at 128 gigs for the base and 256 gigs for the Plus. Rest everything is quite obvious, except you will see that the batteries of both the phones have been increased by 200 mAh. And then coming to the S23 Ultra, the big additions are more RAM and more storage options. Obviously the 200 megapixel camera, which we've been all talking about. The front camera has gone down from 40 to 12 megapixel, and while that might seem like a downgrade, it's actually not. And I do briefly touch upon that in my previous video, so I'll leave a link to that here in the card. Now, to state the obvious, it does look like majority of the S23 launch event is going to spend its time talking about the cameras, and there are some other updates that I have again spoken about in my previous video, so make sure you do check that out, okay? And yeah, that's pretty much it. To say the least, I'm super excited to get my hands on the S23 base variant and the Ultra and test it all out, like the cameras, the battery, the performance, and I'll be posting all of those videos on the channel and quick updates on Instagram. So you might want to subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on Instagram. I'll leave the link in the description. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section. And as always, if this was helpful, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell notification icon and mark all. It really helps the channel grow. I'll see you guys in the next one.